Alrighty, so this is part 2 of that video. I'm going to place a cash game. This is 5 cent, 10 cent. So hopefully there'll be a mix of passive players and aggressive players, and we can sort of start making notes on them, just in the same way as we would in real life. We would just do it in our heads versus making notes on the computer. But we're just sitting here waiting for our big blind, so we can already look at the action of the hand. We got 6 players. Like I said, the maximum buy-in is $10, so minimum buy-in is $4. And oftentimes, just by looking at sort of players' starting stacks, you can get a bit of a read on if they're going to be a good player or a bad player. It's not always the case, but more often than not, when you see a player buying in for the maximum, they're more likely to be a good player. This player is limped on the button, so we're just going to suggest passive. And we're going to check. And we're going to do the same idea as I told you. We're going to play quite tight for the first 20, 25 hands, and then we're going to sort of evaluate all the opponents and then start trying to play some hands according to their sort of repertoire. So this player raises 25 cents with 2 callers, quick callers, both short stacked. They're likely 2 of the weaker players. We're just going to play a little bit passive here until we get sort of to know everyone. I don't mind leading out here into the 2 opponents or 3 opponents. And now we have what we think is 1 weak opponent here. We have top pair with good kicker. We're going to bet again. And again, he seems to be a weak and passive player. He might have missed a flush. He might have a weak ace high. It's close between checking and betting here. I might as well bet and try and get value. And he has a weak ace as well. So again, it looks like he limped in, or sorry, he just called a raise with a weak ace. And I'll put passive and loose. The fact that he called a raise with an ace and a 5 is a pretty good sign that he is a passive and loose player, which is exactly the kind of player we want. We can mark him. What's a good color for someone we like playing against? Green. So green players are players that we're looking to play against. They play lots of hands and they play passively. So I didn't really see this action pre-flop. I think it was just limped in and checked all the way down. A couple of times now I've seen this guy just overbet the river, which is interesting. Sometimes with a weak and passive player, they can tend to be passive, but then when they actually have a strong hand and they only have 1 bet, they'll bet big because they're trying to get value. Okay, huge raise and a 3-bet, and then a call of a 3-bet by this guy and just a pretty big 4-bet. So I think this poker guy is got the goods. He's got aces, yeah. And we can already see our fish player. How about a 3? No, he's dead. Our fishy player just got busted. So clearly, the fact that this guy 4-bet is probably a good sign that he's aggressive. So I'll put aggressive. And the fact that this guy, I've already actually got him marked. He's probably going to be tight and aggressive. Because I've marked him red, that's usually a sign of like, I don't love playing with these kind of players. The fact that he 3-bet and then folded when someone 4-bet is usually a sign of a decent player. So we'll just keep that information in our hand. Again, I wasn't really paying attention to this hand too much. And we'll keep our eye on this hand. So we have a very short stack in here, raising 3 times the blind. So he may be an aggressive player, we'll see. Okay, this guy just limped. So it's hard to say. He did 4-bet, but he had aces, so it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to 4-bet a lot of hands. So we can sort of reevaluate this. Okay, everyone's checked all the way down. 4 cards straight on board, paired board, and everyone checks the whole way. And then pair of 5s takes it down. Okay, it looks like this guy that we've already labeled as passive and loose has come back to the table with a full stack, which is a good sign. We're happy to have him at the table. So again, remember, when someone is passive and loose, you want to play good hands against them and get lots and lots of value. You know, you can get value with top pairs, but don't necessarily try to bluff them too often. Because they're loose, they will be willing to pay you off with weak hands. Okay, so this guy raised, first one in, and then he showed something. Let's see what he showed. Thought he showed something. Anyway. Okay, this guy is certainly aggressive. I like our call on him. He's only raised and 3-bet that we've seen him. We haven't seen this new guy get into any pots. Okay, so our loose and passive player has called a raise, so that's a good sign. He continues to be loose and passive. Okay, we have our loose passive player in the pot, so we're happy to complete here and just try and see a cheap flop. We flopped a weak top pair, so I think we can bet this. We're just trying to get the D-silver player to fold and get just against the loose passive player. Again, we don't have a good kicker with our queen, so we're not necessarily trying to get a whole bunch of money in the pot. But we're happy to take it down. Oh, he disconnected, so we're gonna have to wait a minute. All right, took down a small pot there. So again, I haven't seen this 12 Mile Pete play hand yet. Might be a little bit more on the tight side. Oh boy, patience. Not sure why everyone's taking so long at this table. Okay, we have King Queen. That is certainly a playable hand against 5 opponents. Okay, we got our weak passive player calling. We want to be in pots against him. Okay, clearly people are having some connection issues. So we're just going to raise and try and get just against that one opponent. And we have this player who hasn't played a hand all day and re-raises, so we're just going to fold here. And the fact that he 3-bet indicates he's an aggressive player. I'll put aggressive maybe tight. So we're not totally sure on him. Okay, we got 3-bet again. This time we have jacks. If it were a higher stakes table, I might 4-bet here. I'm just going to call. Just going to see what happens in the flop. We flopped an overpair. We're beating ace, king, ace, queen. We're losing to queens, tens, and jacks. It makes a small bet, about a third of the pot. Just trying to keep this pot relatively small. Now ace, queen gets there, king, queen gets there. I think if he bets again, we can fold. And you bet about 2/3 the pot. So again, that's a 3-bet and 2 barrels. If he had ace, king, I think he might check back the turn. So we're gonna let that one go. But again, this guy, we'll put him aggressive. Seeing him do a 3-bet. So even just about 15 hands in now, 20 hands in, we're starting to get a bit of a feel of the table. We can already tell our first mark is this guy. He's seen a ton of flops, and he has played a lot of hands. All right, we got 2 jacks. 2 jacks in the hole. We're certainly going to raise it, try and get just against this one opponent. We are out of position, which is unfortunate. But now we are going to try and just bump it up and get just our weaker opponent to fold. Flop is coordinated. I like the idea of betting a lot here and taking it down. Okay, so this guy raised it 2.5 times the blind, so he's very likely a regular if he's got it programmed in to bet that smaller amount. This guy might actually be passive. I'm going to take away this aggressive and say passive, because he has limped a few times and he just called a raise there. I'm just going to watch that last hand back again so I see if I can get some. All right, so this guy raised with his jacks. Call, 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 call. This guy just called with 2 nines, which is fine. I bet a little bit with his jacks. Called. There's another 10. Bets again. Yeah, so he's aggressive, maybe tight, a bit scared. Value bet. That's just a little bit of a side note that if he bets the river, he's very likely not thinly betting, as an expression. Okay, so we got a limp, we got a raise. Again, I definitely like this guy as passive again, because he's now limped a number of times. The only time he was aggressive was when he had aces there. So we might actually label this guy as a little bit weaker. So we now have 2 potential weak opponents. Although he did bet a full pot. We'll see how this turns out. Okay, took it down. Okay, so this guy is definitely tight, because I've rarely seen him play a pot. So well, he's another player that we don't love having at our table. So you can see we have a mix of 3 players that we're not loving at our table and 2 players that we think are going to be good for us. So again, we're going to focus our attention on taking money off, mostly off these two guys. And because these players are tighter, if we're going to bluff, we're more likely to bluff at these tighter players. Which could also be bluffing by 3-betting them and 4-betting them more. Okay, I didn't really watch that hand, my bad. Alright, again, this guy's raising to 2.5 times the blind, sign of a regular. You can see this Jascrete guy is basically just slowly bleeding off his money. Calls another raise. Okay, snap call, snap call. And anytime we're seeing a pot like this, we're cheering for the weaker player when we're not in the hand, of course. Will he potentially bluff? Bets half pot. Interesting. Was that a value bet, I guess, with 2 queens? That was an interesting bet on the river by this guy. And again, he just called with 2 queens, which is another sign of a passive player. Just called pre-flop. It's another interesting note to take on that guy. And the fact that that guy, this Aaron guy, opened with 8-9 suited from early position. That's a good note to have as well. So we're collecting data, but we're probably decently close to being able to start just playing a regular game based on the opponents. I think we have enough pretty good reads on these opponents. One of the weak players left, so that's a good sign. So hopefully the seat gets filled by a weak player. We don't have another good player playing with us. Okay, I think I might actually have to put this guy as a bit looser. Because I have seen him raise quite a bit, and this 12 guy is quite tight for sure. Okay, we have a half pot bet, pretty big pot. Let's see what happens. Min bet on the river. That's a weird play. Does he have like King Jack and he's afraid of that ace? Or did he miss his flush? Ooh, the short stack, or the weak player wants in chips. That's good news. Okay. So now we're going to start playing. Okay, I was going to raise if only the Jasky guy got in. But with the guy coming behind him, I don't mind two weak players being involved. We have a weaker ace. So hopefully we just get heads up against one of them. Okay, that's good. I'm going to bet again. And we're probably going to check the river. Try and induce a bluff. Hopefully he has a missed flush draw. That king is actually kind of bad because he has, I mean, he bet 3 times the pot, so it's a pretty easy fold here. But if you bet a reasonable amount, he actually very likely has a king there. But, I mean, if he tries to bet 3 times the blind on a bluff, that's a pretty awful play. But, yeah, I think it's fairly likely that he was trying to get value by getting lucky on the river by overbetting. Overbet 3x river when second pair paired. Sorry, I'm just doing a little something on the side. Trying to, oops, that's not the one I want. Cancel. All right, so 2 guys limping in. Good sign. This Hecky guy's new, so we got to keep our eye on him. That's the one. Okay. All right, we got a pretty big raise from Aaron out of the blind, so he's very strong here, I would imagine. Although he's a bit more aggressive than some of the other players right now. Does a 3rd pot bet, which seems to be his regular. That's 3rd pot again on the turn. Gets called. Now there's a 4 card straight on board. He checks. I mean, I feel like he's got ace king all day. King queen. That's good. Again, it's a little bit weak of a hand to be 3-betting from the blinds, in my opinion. So he's definitely a bit on the over aggressive. So I would actually make him a bit of a loose. We'll make it purple, like a loose aggressive player. So that's fun that we can see a looser aggressive player on the table. Okay, we'll start opening some hands now. King jack off. We got called by our weak opponent, both weak opponents. That's good. Somewhat coordinated board with 2 overcards, backdoor straight draw. The weaker player min bet into us or make a tiny bet. I think we call here once and see the turn. I don't think there's much value bluffing him. We'll just try and get to the river. If he checks again, okay, bet the river, so we just let it go. Okay, we have a suited ace. We're against the one opponent we think's weak. We'll likely raise it if he just calls. Okay. Let this one go. We should pay attention to this heck yeah, bro. He is more likely to be a regular than a terrible player. Okay, he does a big 3-bet here, which is again a sign of a aggressive player. Just put aggressive. And you can see this Jas Karit is absolutely seen almost every flop. So it's a huge, huge fishy fish. Okay, so this guy 5x raised, and this very aggressive player 3-bet. And then this guy folded, so I got to give this guy respect. He raised to just play against the weak player, and folded to a 3-bet. So he's likely a regular, unfortunately. So right now we have two seemingly regular players, both quite tight. And then we have two looser players, and we have one a little bit over aggressive, but still good player. I would say at this stake you want at least half and half, weak players to good players. So I likely, if I were trying to do this for a living or anything, I would likely run away from this table. Okay, decent sized pot. Not sure what happened. King, queen high. It's a pair of aces. I will have to look that up. Call, check, raise, check, bet. Call on the turn with king, queen high. That is extraordinarily loose. Okay, good to know. I just put like a loose, don't bluff. Okay, we have a weak ace in the small blind. We've got our one terrible player, so let's try and get in cheap. Just check fold on this flop. I expect Hakia to be at least top pair king, but now there's a 4-card straight on board. Yeah, he's got a king. Top pair king. Sorry, I'm just slurping some water back. That's kind of rude. All right, we've been playing for nearly half an hour. I think the logistics of what I was trying to show in the last video hopefully makes some sense in here. We were able to essentially look at several hands that all these players have played to allow us to understand better sort of what their deal is. So again, I see this player's weak. He's seeing every single flop. We're going to raise, and we're going to get just against him. He's not necessarily going to fold that often, but we are going to bet and try and take it down. And maybe he's gone. So we'll just sit out and play our free hands. Okay. Get a few more hands in. And again, so if I were to be playing this game for an hour or two, what I would likely do would be raise more often when this guy gets into the pots, try and get heads up against him. 3-bet a little bit more against the regulars, and just try and hold my own against the good players. Okay, this is interesting. All right, we got 3 people calling a 3-bet. So it's a pretty good sized pot. The 12-mile guy 3-bet, and he's been pretty much the tightest player. He's going to bet small on the flop. One caller. $4 in the pot now. Okay, both players check the turn. Right. Maybe he's got ace king. The Yeah, ace jack suited. And he wins it with ace high. So that's a decently strong hand to 3-bet. And his opponent had king jack offsuit. So there you go. All right, see you around. Let me know if you have any questions.